There comes a moment in every believer's life when strength fails, logic collapses, and everything you try to fix falls apart. It's that moment when you look at the mountain before you and realize this one won't move by your hands. That's when heaven whispers, now let me. Because God never shows his power where yours still works, he waits until your hands are empty so his glory can be full. Some of you have been fighting battles that only surrender can win. You've prayed, cried, and reasoned, but the door remains shut. And the Spirit of God says tonight, stop pushing what I've already locked. Step back and trust me beyond your reach. For faith is not holding on, it is letting go and believing that when you release it, God will catch it. When you detach from what you cannot control, you don't lose it, you elevate it. Detachment is not the absence of love, it's the proof of trust. It means saying, Lord, if this is yours, keep it. If not, remove it. And when you can speak that from your soul, you are no longer ruled by fear. You've entered the realm where miracles happen. Because miracles are born in the hearts that are free from control. The miracle you seek will not come from more striving, but from deeper surrender. You're waiting for a sign, but God is waiting for your stillness. He cannot bless what you're still trying to manipulate. Release your anxiety, your deadlines, your reasoning, and say, Father, I trust you even when I don't understand you. That is where divine power begins, where human certainty ends. Some of you are praying for something that seems impossible, but the impossible is God's natural environment. He lives where man says it can't be done. The Red Sea didn't part until Moses stopped explaining and started trusting. Lazarus didn't rise until the people stopped weeping and removed the stone. The walls of Jericho didn't fall until obedience replaced strategy. So tonight, as you lift your hands in this prayer, don't beg, believe, don't cling, release. Say within your spirit, God, I detach from every outcome I can't control, from every person I can't fix, from every fear I can't silence. For when you let go of what drains you, heaven fills you with what sustains you. You will see miracles not because you fought harder, but because you trusted deeper. When you reach the end of yourself, you have finally reached the beginning of God. Faith begins where human ability ends. It is the place where your intellect bows, your effort collapses, and your heart stands naked before the vastness of God's sovereignty. True faith does not operate within the realm of what you can calculate or predict. It thrives where logic is exhausted and human reason has no explanation left to give. You see, as long as you can still manage, control, or manipulate an outcome, you do not yet need faith. You only need strategy. But when life corners you into situations where nothing seems to move, no matter how hard you try, it is there that faith steps in as heaven's response to human limitation. God designed life in such a way that your strength would one day meet its end. Not because he wants you weak, but because he wants you dependent. Dependence is not weakness. It is the wisdom of knowing that divine purpose can only unfold when the creature surrenders to the Creator. The power of God does not manifest in the comfort of control, but in the chaos of surrender. Faith begins where your reach stops. It starts in the moment when you admit, Lord, I've done all I can, and now it's in your hands. That confession is not failure. It's the most powerful declaration a human can make. When Abraham looked at his barren wife, Sarah, and heard God's promise of a son, every physical and logical part of his being said, impossible. Yet that was precisely where faith was required. If Abraham and Sarah had been young and strong, conception would have been natural. But God waited until the womb was dead, until human possibility had expired, so that his glory could not be mistaken for human ability. Faith begins where natural ability ends, because faith is heaven's language, not man's. It's when God says, let me demonstrate what only I can do. Every person God ever used reached a breaking point before they reached a breakthrough. Moses came to the edge of the Red Sea with an army behind him and no path forward. The disciples stood helpless before a storm that mocked their strength. The widow of Zarephath had only a handful of flour and a little oil. All of them were standing at the edge of human ability, at that sacred border where faith takes over. The miracle did not happen in their comfort zone. It happened when they admitted their powerlessness. The Red Sea parted, the storm was silenced, the oil overflowed. Not because of human effort, but because of divine intervention. The reason many believers never see the fullness of God's power is because they never truly run out of their own. We cling to what we can calculate. We want a guarantee before we obey. But faith does not wait for evidence, it creates it. Faith is not blind, it simply sees differently. It does not depend on sight to confirm truth. It trusts God's word as final authority. When you walk by faith, you are saying, God, I don't need to see how this will work out because I know who is working it out. That shift from understanding to trusting is the birthplace of miracles. You must understand that faith is not emotional excitement. It is not saying, I believe, while still depending on your own ability. Faith is the quiet conviction that God's word is true, even when every visible fact denies it. It's the inner rest that says, even if I can't trace his hand, I will trust his heart. When your plans fail, when your options dry up, when your resources disappear, that is not the end of your story. It's the stage upon which God steps in to display his glory. God will often allow your strength to fail so that your faith can be born. That's why certain doors don't open no matter how hard you knock, and some relationships end no matter how much you try to keep them alive. He allows your resources to run out so that your reliance can shift. He lets your ability meet its limit so that you may discover his limitlessness. The journey of faith is not about God meeting you in your success. It's about him revealing himself in your surrender. Faith begins where human ability ends, because faith is the bridge between what you can do and what God can do. It's the invisible link that connects your obedience to his omnipotence. When Peter stepped out of the boat, logic screamed, "You will drown." Laws of nature said, "You will sink." But faith said, if he called you, you can walk. Peter's ability ended the moment he left the boat, but his faith began the moment he looked at Jesus and took that step. The water did not become solid before he stepped. It became solid because he stepped. Faith does not wait for the path to appear. It walks and the path appears. Some of you are standing before an impossible situation right now. A financial crisis, a broken relationship, an incurable diagnosis, a closed door that defies reason. You've done all you can, and it seems nothing works. That is exactly where God wants you, because only when your effort ends does his evidence begin. God is not impressed by what you can do. He is glorified by what you can't do without him. Every miracle begins with a human impossibility. The feeding of the 5,000 started with hunger. The healing of the blind man began with darkness. The resurrection of Lazarus began with death. The moment something becomes impossible for you, it becomes possible for God. Faith is not born in the sunshine of certainty. It is forged in the midnight of impossibility. When the mind cannot comprehend and the heart cannot hold on, faith whispers, God is still able. That whisper carries the weight of heaven. It is the same faith that allowed Daniel to sleep in the lion's den, that empowered Esther to approach the king, that sustained Joseph in prison. They all faced moments where human effort could do nothing, and yet it was in that nothingness that divine power moved. To live by faith means to become comfortable with mystery. It means you no longer need to control outcomes to have peace. It's learning to say, I may not know how, but I know who. And when you live in that confidence, you stop fearing what you cannot predict. You stop begging for signs and start walking in trust. The less control you have, the more peace you gain, because control was never your assignment, trust was. Faith begins where human ability ends, because it removes the illusion that you were ever in control to begin with. God is constantly calling his people beyond the reach of human possibility. He will always call you to something bigger than you, because that's how he ensures that your story gives him glory. If you can do it without him, it's not faith, it's performance. Faith invites you to walk on water, to build an ark before it rains, to believe for a child when your body says no, to stand firm when everyone else gives up. Faith does not consult your circumstances. It consults your covenant. It does not measure the size of the problem. It measures the size of your God. There comes a point when your plans must die for his purpose to live. And when they do not grieve the end of your ability. Celebrate the beginning of his authority. Because it's only in the absence of your strength that his strength becomes visible. The faith that moves mountains is not born in comfort. It is born in surrender. It's when you finally stopped trying to make things happen and start trusting the one who already finished them. That's where faith truly begins, at the end of yourself and at the beginning of God. Detachment is not loss, it is power. To detach does not mean to stop caring. It means to stop carrying what was never yours to control. It is the quiet confidence that your peace is not held hostage by outcomes, and your worth is not defined by what stays or leaves your life. True spiritual maturity begins when you learn to love deeply, give freely, serve faithfully, and yet remain inwardly unshaken when things change. Detachment is not the absence of emotion. It is the presence of wisdom. It is the spiritual posture that says, I will do my part, but I will not play God. Many people confuse attachment with love. They think clinging tightly to someone or something is proof of devotion. But love that clings becomes a cage, and cages suffocate the very beauty they try to preserve. God never called you to cling. He called you to trust. When you are attached to people, possessions, or outcomes, your emotions rise and fall with their behavior. You become a prisoner of what you fear losing. But when you are detached, you love from freedom, not from fear. You bless without expectation. You serve without applause, and you release without resentment. That is divine strength. Detachment does not mean indifference. It means independence from the outcome. It's knowing that even if what you hoped for never happens, you are still whole. You are not waiting for a person to make you complete or a door to open before you feel secure. You understand that your source is God, not circumstance. That revelation changes everything. Because as long as you are attached to what you can lose, you will live in anxiety. You will pray from desperation instead of confidence. And your joy will always be conditional. But detachment restores your spiritual authority. It anchors you in a truth that says, even if this fades, I remain. When you detach from what you cannot control, you begin to see how much energy you once wasted on trying to fix what only God can handle. Detachment is the art of letting God be God. It is saying, I release my need to understand, to predict, to manipulate. And I surrender to your wisdom. This posture doesn't make you see powerless. It makes you powerful. Because you are no longer reacting to life. You're responding through peace. The storms may still rage, but you are no longer tossed by every wave of emotion. You stand still, knowing that what is yours cannot miss you, and what leaves you was never meant to stay. Every great act of faith is born in detachment. Abraham could not become the father of many nations until he detached from his homeland. Joseph could not reign in Egypt until he detached from the comfort of his father's house. Even Jesus demonstrated detachment when he said, not my will, but yours be done. Every time you choose God's plan over your personal preference, you are practicing divine detachment. You are saying, Lord, I release my idea of how life should go, so I can embrace how you have designed it to unfold. That's not weakness, it's spiritual mastery. People who cannot detach live in constant torment. They are tied to what others think, to how others treat them, to whether things go their way. They measure peace by performance, But those who learn the sacred art of detachment walk with a calm that confuses the world. They can be rejected and still remain kind. They can lose money and still remain thankful. They can walk through fire and still not smell like smoke. Because their peace does not depend on external conditions. It flows from internal alignment with God. Detachment turns pain into power because it breaks the illusion that your stability depends on anything temporary. When you practice detachment, you stop trying to control what God has already resolved. Stop praying out of panic and start praying out of partnership. You say, Father, if this is not your will, remove it and give me the strength not to chase what you've released. That is where miracles happen. When your heart no longer fights for what heaven has already finished. You may cry, but you won't collapse. You may be disappointed, but you won't be destroyed. Because detachment shifts your focus from outcomes to obedience, from reaction to revelation. Attachment often comes from fear. Fear of being alone, fear of being forgotten, fear of losing identity. But fear is the opposite of faith. And as long as you are attached to what you fear losing, fear will dominate your choices. Detachment sets you free from that fear. It's the moment you realize that losing people, opportunities, or possessions doesn't reduce your value. It refines it. Every time God removes something, He's teaching you that you are not sustained by it. What you thought you needed was only a lesson in disguise. Detachment transforms pain into clarity and loss into direction. Some people think they are strong because they fight to hold everything together. But real strength is shown in the ability to let go gracefully. It takes more faith to release than to resist. When you hold tightly to what is fading, you block what is forming. God cannot place new blessings into clenched fists. Detachment is the act of opening your hand, saying, Lord, I trust your timing, I trust your plan, and I trust that what leaves my life is making room for what's meant to enter. You cannot receive with fists full of control. You must release to receive. Detachment also tests your humility, because when you are attached, you think you know what's best for you. You try to arrange, to predict, to secure the outcomes that match your desire. But detachment says, I no longer need to know how, I just need to know who. It's surrendering your need for certainty and embracing divine mystery. The highest level of trust is not believing that God will give you what you want. It's believing that He will give you what you need, even when it looks like loss. Detachment reveals the maturity of your faith. Immature faith demands constant reassurance. Mature faith rests even in silence. When you're detached, unanswered prayers don't shake your belief. They strengthen it, because you've learned that silence is not absence. It divine strategy. Sometimes God withholds answers to detach you from dependency on signs and teach you to rely on His presence. When your heart no longer trembles at delays, you have entered a new dimension of faith. To detach emotionally and spiritually is not to disconnect from life. It's to connect to life correctly. You still love, but without fear. You still dream, but without desperation. You still serve, but without expectation of return. Detachment purifies love, because now you love for the sake of love, not for validation. It purifies prayer, because now you pray to align, not to manipulate. It purifies service, because now you serve from purpose, not performance. It is not withdrawal, it's transformation. The greatest expression of trust is to stand in uncertainty and still declare, God, I am safe here. Detachment is that declaration lived out daily. It's the ability to face changing seasons without losing your peace. It's knowing that your purpose cannot be undone by what leaves you, and your destiny cannot be delayed by who rejects you. When you detach, you start to see God's hand even in endings. You realize that every exit is a divine escort towards something higher. Detachment is freedom in its purest form. It liberates you from the tyranny of needing everything to go your way. It silences the voice of fear that says, what if I lose it? and replaces it with faith that says, even if I lose it, I still have him. And having him means you have everything, because once your peace is rooted in the eternal, nothing temporal can uproot it. Detachment does not take away your passion. It refines it. It channels your energy toward purpose instead of control, toward faith instead of fear, toward love instead of attachment. So when life starts shifting, when people walk away, when dreams seem delayed, remember, you are not losing. You are being aligned. What is removed is what no longer matches your assignment. What remains is what's meant to carry you forward. And as you release, you will feel an unfamiliar calm. The peace of knowing that you no longer need to hold everything together, because the one who holds the universe together is holding you. Every delay is a divine setup. It is one of the hardest truths to accept, because human nature wants immediacy, clarity, and progress that can be measured. We are conditioned to equate delay with denial, but in God's kingdom, delay is a dimension of design. Heaven operates by purpose, not by pressure. When God seems to be taking his time, he is not ignoring you. He is preparing what you are not yet ready to carry. The delay is not punishment. It is positioning. You see, if God gave you everything you prayed for when you wanted it, it would not bless you. It would break you. Timing is not just about receiving, it's about readiness. When God delays, he is not being silent, he is being strategic. Every divine promise has an appointed season, and no amount of impatience can rush it. The tree doesn't argue with the season, it simply grows in silence until the appointed time of fruitfulness. Likewise, your destiny will not manifest until the soil of your soul is mature enough to sustain it. What looks like stagnation in your life may actually be the slow construction of something eternal. God never wastes time, he redeems it. He builds in hiddenness what will later be revealed in glory. Delay is the tool God uses to refine desire. When things don't happen quickly, you begin to discover whether you wanted the blessing or the blesser. Many people love God's promises more than his presence. And so he delays not to deny them, but to detach them from idolatry. The waiting room becomes the proving ground of purity. It is where God tests whether your faith is rooted in outcomes or in obedience. When you still worship while waiting, when you still give when you lack, when you still trust when nothing moves, that is when heaven takes notice. Delay exposes what you really believe. In every delay, there is divine alignment taking place. God is not only preparing the blessing, he is preparing you to handle it. A premature blessing becomes a burden. That is why sometimes doors that seem perfect stay closed. You may have the vision, but not yet the capacity. God knows that if he opens the door too soon, your character will not sustain what your calling attracts. He will not allow the blessing to destroy the believer. So he delays to strengthen your roots before he displays your fruit. What looks like a pause is actually protection. When Joseph dreamed of greatness, he didn't go straight to the palace. He went through pits and prisons. Those were not detours, they were divine designs. The delay was developing him. In the pit, he learned humility. In Potiphar's house, he learned stewardship. In prison, he learned leadership. By the time he reached Pharaoh's court, he wasn't just gifted, he was grounded. God used delay to forge depth. That is why you cannot rush destiny. There is a process to preparation. Every divine promise has an incubation period. If you rush it, you forfeit it. Sometimes the delay is not even about you. It is about others being positioned for your arrival. God may be aligning hearts, places, and timing so that when you finally step into purpose, everything fits perfectly. You may be ready for the blessing, but the blessing may not yet be ready for you. Think of David, anointed as a teenager, but not crowned until years later. God was arranging the throne, shifting the kingdom, preparing the people. The delay was not a denial of David's destiny. It was a synchronization of divine events. When God says, wait, he is working behind the scenes in ways you cannot see. Delay is also God's way of detoxing you from dependence on speed. We live in a world obsessed with immediacy, but God's kingdom moves at the speed of trust. The more you trust, the less you rush. Impatience is often a sign that you are trying to lead where you were meant to follow. Faith is not proven by how quickly you get results. It's proven by how long you can wait without losing expectation. The faith that lasts is the faith that trusts when heaven is quiet. When God delays, he often hides evidence. He allows you to feel forgotten so that your faith matures. If you always saw signs, you would never grow roots. It is in the hidden seasons that your dependence deepens. Think of a seed planted in the soil. It disappears from sight, buried in darkness. Yet that is where transformation happens. The seed does not panic when unseen because it understands that burial is not the end, it's the beginning. In the same way, when God hides you, he is not burying you, he is planting you. The delay is your soil. There are moments when delay feels unbearable. You pray, fast, believe, and still nothing moves. It feels like heaven is ignoring your cries. But silence does not mean absence. God's silence is often his strategy to build endurance in you. If he spoke every time you called, you would never learn to stand on what he already said. Delay forces you to remember, not react. It trains you to live from revelation, not from response. It's in those quiet seasons that faith graduates from theory to reality. Delay also purifies motives. When you wait long enough, selfish desires die. You start to pray differently. You begin to say, God, not my will, but yours. The waiting strips away pride, entitlement, and ego until all that's left is surrender. What once felt like a punishment becomes a purification. You realize that what God is doing in you is greater than what you were asking him to do for you. The delay is God's classroom, teaching patience, trust, and maturity that no sermon can impart. You see, divine delay often disguises divine favor. God is delaying because he is too faithful to give you less than his best. You may think you're waiting for something to happen, but in truth, God is waiting for something in you to shift. He's teaching you that P must precede possession. You can't enter the promise anxious and still expect to enjoy it. That's why some of your prayers are being answered with not yet. Heaven is saying, I love you too much to let you mishandle this moment. Even creation testifies to divine timing. No flower forces itself to bloom. No season skips its process. Nature operates under the law of patience because God designed it that way. The same principle governs your life. If you rush the process, you destroy the product. So instead of asking, why is this taking so long? Start asking, what is God building in me during this? Because every season of waiting is sacred. It's heaven shaping you for what's next. When you look at Scripture, you'll notice that every great promise came with a period of waiting. Noah waited for rain. Abraham waited for Isaac. Joseph waited for freedom. Hannah waited for a child. Jesus waited for his hour. Waiting is not evidence of God's absence. It's evidence of his order. Every delay serves a prophetic purpose. It synchronizes destiny. It builds faith. It humbles pride, and it magnifies grace. Sometimes God delays not because you're unworthy, but because what he's about to release requires maturity. You cannot carry divine responsibility with immature faith. The delay is God's way of building weight within you so that when the blessing arrives, you don't crumble under it. He is shaping your capacity through waiting. You may feel stretched, but stretching is proof of preparation. So when nothing seems to move, when you feel stuck between promise and fulfillment, remember that you are in divine timing. Heaven does not operate by your calendar. It moves according to purpose. What feels late to you is right on time to God. The same God who delayed Lazarus' healing until death took over is the same God who turned that delay into resurrection. He waited so that glory could be greater. Every delay carries a hidden glory. God is not just making things happen, he's making them matter. Every delay is a divine setup, because what God is building in the unseen will one day make sense in the seen. The prayers you prayed are not lost. They are being layered into a tapestry of perfect timing. When it finally unfolds, you will look back and realize that if God had answered earlier, it would not have been complete. The delay was not wasted, it was woven. And in that realization, you will understand that heaven was never late, it was aligning you for something only time could prepare. Miracles require surrender, not struggle. So many people miss divine intervention because they are too busy trying to manage what God is asking them to release. We think miracles come through more effort, more strategy, more pushing. But heaven does not respond to strain. It responds to surrender. The moment you stop fighting for control, you give God permission to take over. And when God takes over, natural laws bend, doors open, and situations transform in ways your effort never could. Surrender is not passive. It's powerful. It is the most active form of faith because it says, I trust you more than I trust my own understanding. When you surrender, you are not giving up. You are giving God room to move. As long as your hands are on it, His hands won't be. The miracle begins when you finally say, God, I can't do this anymore in my strength. The Red Sea didn't part when Israel panicked. It parted when Moses lifted his hand in obedience. That simple act of surrender released heaven's power. Many believers live in exhaustion because they confuse faith with striving. They think the louder they pray, the faster they run, the harder they work, the quicker God will act. But God doesn't move through pressure, He moves through posture. The posture of surrender, open hands, open heart, quiet trust, invites divine intervention. When you release control, you are declaring that God is wiser than your plans, stronger than your fears, and faithful beyond your timing. It's in that stillness that miracles are born. Struggle keeps you focused on what you can do. Surrender keeps you focused on what God can do. When you struggle, you drain your spirit trying to force outcomes that were never in your authority. But surrender says, Father, I don't need to know how this will happen. I just need to know you are with me. That shift of focus is what activates faith. Every miracle in Scripture followed an act of surrender. The widow gave her last meal. Elijah poured water on the altar. Jesus blessed the 5 loaves. They all released something before receiving something. Heaven never multiplies what you hold back. Surrender requires humility, and humility is the doorway to the supernatural. Pride says, I can fix it. Faith says, God, I can't, but you can. Pride resists help. Faith invites it. When you lay down your pride and your plans, you align yourself with divine flow. The more you yield, the more He moves. And that is the mystery of miracles. They don't come through effort, they come through alignment. When your heart is fully aligned with His will, you don't have to chase blessings. Blessings start to chase you. So if you want to see God do what's beyond your reach, stop trying to control what's within His. Your striving only delays what surrender could have released long ago. Let go of your timing, your logic, and your fear, and simply say, Lord, I'm yours. Because the greatest miracles are not performed by those who fought hardest, but by those who trusted deepest.